to the next session, Intrigues and Grace is Royal. To take this session forward, may I request Mr. Jyoti Kamal, Managing Editor, News18, to please come up on stage with me. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join us with a huge round of applause as we welcome our esteemed guests, Raja Amrinder Singh Brar and Sardar Tegbir Singh Brar on stage, please. And before I hand over the stage to Jyoti Kamal, can we take a quick look at the AVs, please?
It's a long fight he has fought. Might not have been on the fields one would imagine, but hard nonetheless. The 27-year-long battle for inheriting the royal assets of Maharaja Sir Harinder Singh Brar, the erstwhile ruler of Faridkot, is considered one of the longest battles in the legal history of this region. Not swayed by the legal victory granting him a share in the huge asset portfolio of the Faridkot Royal, he continues to remain humble and work-oriented. A banker by profession, his story is one of perseverance and determination. Ladies and gentlemen, Raja Amrinder Singh Brar. He is a self-described anachronism between a feudal and a new India. A villager from Muktsar who traverses the globe in search of races to win. He manages one of India's largest stud farms and comes from the Sarai Naga family. He is a Sardar of the Phidde branch of Clan Brar. He is the grandson of a former Chief Minister of Punjab. From politics to being a racing aficionado, Sardar Tegbir Singh Brar is not one to mince words and calls a spade a spade. Ladies and gentlemen, Sardar Tegbir Singh Brar.
All yours, Jyoti.
Thanks, Misha. Amrinder ji, Tegbir ji, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Brar. I mean, just to figure out, Tegbir ji, if I ask you, what is the history of the Brars? Where do the Brars come from? And what is their connection with royalty?
Well, all of us are basically more or less Malwai Jats, I would say. It's kind of cool that I'm sitting out here with Amrinder because our grandfathers were very, very dear friends. They used to basically go greyhound coursing together. They were into horses together. And they were very, very good friends. So it's kind of cool that the both of us are here on stage together just very randomly. But most of us belong to Faridkot, Muktsar, round about that belt. So Sidhu Brar basically is, I'd say, the largest clan. I think one of the most vague things that you can write on your tractor trolley over there is Brar Farm, because that means your trolley could belong to anyone. But like they say over there, you pick up a leaf, you'll find another Brar. So that's basically it.
Correct. So, Tegbir ji, you are in a business which is like absolutely different in terms of the choice that you made, horse breeding. I mean, that's not something that it just starts and then kind of you manage to take it to an absolute next level, which you have done. You have one of the biggest, if not the biggest stud farms in the country. And for you to have done it, it's taken almost 30 to 40 years to have gradually kind of brought it to this level. There's another thing that you strongly believe that while they may be horses, but they are still agriculture in the sense that what goes into those horses is pure agriculture. And you also make sure that the lands from where the fodder comes are your own. It's not fodder that you buy from somewhere where you do not know whether there could be any inorganic components or something in it. So it's a business which is something which takes time to build. So firstly, how did you kind of choose that this is something that you need to kind of focus on, this is something that you need to amplify, this is something that you need to now take forward?
See, this isn't a business that I chose. This is something that, see, basically, I come from a family of cotton farmers. Our land holdings were much larger, pre-independence and things like that. So in the 70s, in 1973, my grandfather and father basically decided to diversify in a sense. We had very good friends of ours who are now in Pakistan, who owned a farm called Shahjiona Stud Farm. So basically, they encouraged us to get into this. It's a very niche kind of a business. It's not something that you can learn that easily. As far as I'm concerned, my first memory as a child is that of a racehorse winning a certain race when I must have been 4 or 5. It's very passion driven. All day, your head and your brain is basically working around it. There's always something happening. Like right now, there'll be a race happening in, say, France, or there'll be a race happening in Uruguay at Montevideo. So, I mean, like, it can be anything, you know. I mean, it's a very diverse game. There's never a right answer. It's very subjective. Over a period of time, you build up your eye. You make a lot of mistakes. We've made a lot of mistakes. Those mistakes are very, very important in learning. I mean, I'm privy to all that because I've got that much more experience because my father did a lot of things right. He did a lot of things wrong. I've learned more from what he did wrong than what he did right, because that anybody would do. Similarly, I'm sure I've made a lot of errors, but some I think we've managed to get a lot more decisions correct than wrong, that we've been around now for almost 50 years. So it's that's basically
Your grandfather, Sardar Harcharan Singh Brar, he was a Chief Minister in Punjab. Your father, Sunny Brar ji, and your mother, Karan Kaur Brar ji, absolutely active in politics. Your father was a more of an introvert kind of way. He was not very outgoing in that sense. And now that horse racing is something which really requires you to be out there, it requires you to be kind of cheering your horses on, it needs absolute hands-on kind of action. You have managed to be that extrovert in the family who kind of gels in with it. Do you think personality traits go with certain kind of professions, or does it work vice versa? The profession that you choose becomes the personality trait. How does it work?
You didn't see my father after he won his first Indian Derby. So when it comes to like being an extrovert and things like that, it's like, see, owning horses, breeding horses, it's a very cerebral pursuit in a sense. And at the same time, it's like running your own little sports franchise. I mean, I've got something that, like, I'll give you a very good example. Recently, like, there's a lot of people go in and spend, like, what we are doing in India is like at a very small level. Like just now, the last, at the Tattersalls December sales, Sheikh Mohammed and John Magnier and people like that spent 120 million pounds in 3 days buying horses. I mean, it's much smaller over here, but at the same time, you got these people going in and buying all these expensive horses. There's this lady called Miss Kirsten Rousing. She owns Tetra Pak, so she's richer than Sheikh Mohammed and John Magnier. She's like, owns one of the largest privately held companies. But she won the biggest race in Europe with a horse that was a 6th generation homebred. So choosing the stallions to cover those mares, those horses racing, curating the family, it's something that I think she started almost 45 or 50 years ago. And the satisfaction that must have given her. I mean, I know because even our lines, many of them go back 5, 6 generations. My grandfather liked a certain pedigree, so he bought a mare, that clicked, then it went on. Some lines go dormant, some lines will come up. Got to deal with the best. It's a very people-oriented business. Like you said, it's agro-based. I employ about 200 people. If I was just farming rice or something like that, I could do with 20. It's a very labor-intensive industry. Pretty much the whole village depends in some roundabout way on the horses. So it's a diversification of agriculture, and at the same time, it's a great lifestyle sport. Everyone can buy a Ferrari, everyone can buy a Lamborghini. Not everyone owns an Indian Derby winner. I'm one of the lucky few that did it. Maharaja of Kashmir was well known in those days that what he would do is he would go in December and pick up what were the best horses which were going to run the Derby in another couple of months. And it never always worked. Sometimes it did. And you get to meet a lot of interesting people. I mean, I've just been last week, I've been in Paris. I'm, like I say, a village boy from Sarai Naga, and that's basically it. You know, hanging out over there with Sheikh Mohammed on one side. Queen Elizabeth was passionate about this as well. I'm sure I could sit and have a conversation with her about pedigrees and horses as well if I ever had the chance in those days. But it's interesting. I mean, it's a very niche kind of a sport.
It's a niche kind of a sport, and it requires a very niche kind of professional to also be able to kind of take care of the horses. In fact, like you were saying, you have 200 people there. They've also turned into a generational sort of employment there, because you can't really be sourcing people to kind of work with horses. So they tend to be families who continue to kind of work with you. So that's become like a specialized pool of people working on the horses.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, you can say I'm just the person who kind of holds it together to a great extent, and I'd be the executive boss, but it's them. I mean, like, there's a separate guy who looks after the feed, there's a separate guy who looks after the medical, there's a separate person who's a foreman for the younger horses, there's a separate person who's a foreman for the pregnant mares, there's two guys who look after the stallions, and both these boys are like fantastic. I mean, their work ethic, they'll hardly be missing for a day in a year, if at that. Their dedication levels are something else. So it's got to do with that. A lot of people don't understand this in the business. A lot of our old farms now, like you take Usha Stud in Delhi, Amita Mehra, I mean, she's a lot more successful than any of us as of right now. But she too, like Major Pradeep Mehra, her father, basically came from a very horse background. He was a very good polo player, 61st Cavalry, and he too is one of those people who understood the value of people and the quality of people. That I remember Amita used to have a farrier called, a foreman called Devi Singh, who I saw from the time I was a little kid till the man retired. Like, so he saw me grow up as well. And he's a great part of the success. We had a guy called Sardar Tegbir Singh, who was from Haryana, who taught us a lot of things. Then my father was a voracious reader, and he was a reluctant politician, I'll let you know that. He didn't really want to get into it, but he was an MLA when he was 27 years old in 1977. And then after that, he left it to his father and said, okay, you do this. And then he again became an MLA in 2007. And I had to sit him down and give him a lecture to say, like, listen, either you take a training license and stick in Bangalore, or you please come back and do what you're supposed to do. Otherwise, don't come and interfere in the work out here. I said, you stick in Bangalore otherwise. So then he finally got down to doing it. Unfortunately, he got unwell and couldn't go on with it, because I think a guy like him was a great loss to the state, because he was a very forward-thinking man, and he understood, he was a cosmopolitan sort of a person. Punjab lacks that. He was well-read, well-educated, everything.
Before I kind of come back to you for a second round, the last question I'll ask in this round is the number of horses in the world going up, or are they coming down? Is the population of horses declining globally, or is it going up?
See, we breed thoroughbred.
I would assume it's going down.
We breed thoroughbred horses. The government is not... look, the petrol that keeps the business going is gambling, right? The clubs, basically, which conduct racing, they get a percentage of what you put out. And basically, that runs their salaries. I mean, these are big organizations, mind you. I mean, you're talking about, like, say, when you look at where it's done right, like Hong Kong, Japan. Japan turns over $16 billion a year in betting. And the JRA basically takes a percentage of that and pumps it back into the sport, into stake money, into the facilities, the race courses and things like that. But these places have sensible tax rates, 7%, 8%. Places like America, you go to Kentucky, it'll be a 1%. So it means if you put out 100 rupees, 1% will go to the government. And it makes more sense because the volumes get that much bigger. Here we've been put in the 28% slab. So what's happened is that Bangalore and Hyderabad, for example, were two places that were growing really, really well in the legal betting. What's happened is that I think between the two of them, they must have been turning over something like 3,500 crores in betting. Once the tax went to 28%, that's come crashing down to about 300 or 400 crores. And that entire amount has basically gone to the illegal bookmaker. So no one's really benefiting from it except that. And the government doesn't quite understand it because they're like, oh, ye ji jua hai. It's very easy to look at it. There's 200 people who work for me. That means that's a large number of families. And the health of this sport is vital for those people. Go to any of the race courses. If you were to go into Bombay, now the mills don't exist over there. The largest employer in that urban part of Bombay, South Bombay, would be the race course. There'll be about 3,000 or 4,000 people that work on that race course. And these aren't engineers, doctors, and these are basic people who I would say are semi-skilled labor. The guys who look after the horses and the guys who look after the track. So it's got this, there's a large employment component for the normal person. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about like overly educated people or anything like that. Whether it's trainers, whether it's jockeys, whether it's riding boys. I mean, we are supplying a lot of the labor to places like Newmarket in England, Lambourne. There's a large number of Rajasthani boys who are going up from Jodhpur district out there. They'll come, spend 2 or 3 years on the race course, learn the basics of riding or looking after horses, and then they go off over there. They get paid £1,000 a week. We can't compete with that. And they go for these 3-year stints or 4-year stints and, you know, that sort of a thing.
From winning races to winning cases,